The apartment door slammed with a force that rattled the framed photos on the wall. One of them, our wedding picture, crashed to the floor, glass shattering across the hardwood. It felt symbolic. You tried to sell my apartment? I kept my voice steady, though my hands trembled with rage. And you thought I wouldn't find out? Robert stood frozen in the doorway, his face a mixture of shock and indignation. His usually impeccable appearance was disheveled, tie askew, stubble on his chin, the haunted look of a man whose plans had spectacularly backfired. This is absurd, Amelia, he stammered, waving a piece of paper, the legal notice my attorney had sent him. This apartment is as much mine as it is yours. We've been married for 28 years, and it took you exactly one phone call to throw those 28 years away, I replied, moving toward the window. The city lights twinkled below, indifferent to the collapse of my marriage. Did you really think I was that naive, Robert? That I wouldn't have protected myself after all these years of watching you sign documents without reading them? His face contorted with confusion, then dawning realization. For the first time in our marriage, I saw something I'd never witnessed before. Robert Warren, successful investment consultant, master of his universe, completely blindsided. That's when I knew I had won. But how did we get here? How does a 28-year marriage dissolve in a single afternoon? Flashback, the phone call. 3 days earlier, I was in Chicago for a publishing conference. As senior editor at Meridian Press, I was finally presenting the historical fiction series I'd been championing for years. The conference room buzzed with excitement as industry executives nodded appreciatively at my presentation. A rare moment of professional triumph I'd postponed too many times for Robert's career, for our children, for everyone but myself. Then my phone lit up. Robert's name flashed on the screen. I excused myself, stepping into the hallway, expecting our usual check-in. Perhaps he was calling to wish me luck, though that would have been uncharacteristic of the man who had forgotten our last 3 anniversaries. I'm divorcing you, he said without preamble, his voice cold and smug. I've already sold the apartment, so you'll need to figure out where you're going to live when you get back. The hallway seemed to tilt beneath my feet. 28 years of marriage, dismissed in a 15-second announcement. You sold the apartment? I managed to keep my voice level, gripping the wall for support. Jessica and I need the money to start our life together, he replied with casual cruelty. She deserves better than that cramped space anyway. Jessica, his 38-year-old associate. The pieces clicked into place. His late nights, sudden client emergencies, the cologne I didn't recognize. I'd suspected, of course. But suspecting and knowing are different wounds. Sounds good, I replied, surprising myself with my composure. I'll see you when I get back. I ended the call and stood motionless, aware that the most important presentation of my career was continuing without me. Behind the conference room doors, opportunities were unfolding that I had waited decades for. And here I was, 54 years old, being discarded like yesterday's newspaper. A memory surfaced, my father's voice from 30 years ago. Amelia, always have a backup plan. No matter how much you love someone, protect yourself first. Dad had lost everything when Mom died without a will. I'd watched him rebuild from nothing. I returned to the conference room, somehow finishing my presentation on autopilot, the words coming from some professional core untouched by personal catastrophe. As publishing executives approached with enthusiasm afterward, I smiled and exchanged business cards, making plans I wasn't sure I'd be alive to keep. Only when I reached my hotel room did I allow myself to feel the full impact of what had happened. But instead of tears, I felt something unexpected crystallizing within me. A cold, clear resolve. At the hotel, the strategy. That evening, sitting on the hotel bed with the Chicago skyline glittering beyond the window, I made a call of my own. Not to Robert. He could wait. Instead, I called Martha Levin, my friend since law school and now one of the city's most respected family attorneys. He did what? Martha's voice crackled with indignation. After everything you've sacrificed for that man's career? Martha knew our history better than anyone. She'd watched me put my legal studies on hold when Robert's first big promotion required relocation. She'd seen me build a different career in publishing while raising our children, Sarah and Michael, now both in their 20s. And she'd witnessed how, even after they'd left home, Robert had discouraged my professional advancement, preferring a wife who remained in his shadow. The apartment, I said, focusing on the practical. Remember when we refinanced last year? The paperwork you had me review? Martha's tone shifted from outrage to intrigue. The one where you transferred the deed solely to your name because he couldn't be bothered to attend the signing? That's the one. For the first time that day, I felt my lips curve into a smile. Robert signed everything without reading it. Lower interest rate was all he cared about. Martha's laugh was like a shot of adrenaline. Oh, Amelia, he's in for a very rude awakening. He can't sell property he doesn't legally own. That transaction is invalid, and if he's taken money from buyers, he's committed fraud. The word fraud sent a surprising thrill through me. For years, Robert had handled our finances, dismissing my questions with patronizing smiles. Don't worry your pretty head about it, he'd say, as if investing our shared earnings was beyond my comprehension. He never knew I'd maintained my own accounts, quietly preparing for a day I hoped would never come. What's our next step? I asked, already reaching for my laptop. First, we notify the buyer that the sale is invalid, Martha replied, and I could hear her shifting into professional mode. Then we prepare a formal letter outlining the legal situation for Robert. And Amelia, she paused, prepare yourself. When narcissists get cornered, they get dangerous. After we hung up, I sat still for a long moment. Outside my window, planes took off and landed at O'Hare, thousands of lives in transit, each carrying their own private battles. I thought of Robert's parents, his father's emotional distance, his mother's obsession with appearances. How they praised him excessively for every small achievement, creating a man who couldn't fathom failure. I understood Robert better than he knew. But understanding didn't equal forgiveness. That night, I didn't cry. Instead, I worked late into the night, preparing notes for Martha, organizing financial documents, and completing the conference presentation materials. When I finally slept, it was the deep, dreamless sleep of someone who, after years of uncertainty, finally sees the path forward. The flight home, memories. On the flight back to New York, memories surfaced unbidden. Robert and I, at 28, walking through that apartment for the first time. How the sunlight had streamed through the windows. How we'd planned where each piece of furniture would go, imagining the life we'd build together. I remembered the birth of our children, Robert holding baby Sarah with wonder in his eyes. Had it all been a performance? Or had he truly changed over the years, ambition and ego gradually eroding the man I'd fallen in love with? There was a time when we'd been happy, when Robert's confidence had been charming rather than arrogant, when his ambition had excited rather than exhausted me. When had it shifted? When had the small slights, the forgotten anniversaries, the dismissive comments, the controlling behavior with our finances, accumulated into this irreparable breach? Perhaps it began after his promotion to senior consultant, when suddenly our social circle consisted exclusively of his colleagues and clients. Or maybe it was when Sarah left for college, and the last tether of our shared purpose had frayed. The in-flight phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. A text from Martha. Buyer notified. Legal letters sent to Robert's email. Prepare for impact. I closed my eyes, trying to center myself. The confrontation ahead wouldn't be easy. Robert had always been skilled at manipulation, at turning situations to make himself the victim. I'd need all my resolve to stand firm. As the plane descended toward JFK, I thought of my mother, who died young but lived fiercely. Never let anyone define your worth, she told me once. Not even someone you love. For too long, I'd allowed Robert to be the measure of my value. No more. At the apartment, the showdown. When I arrived home, the apartment was eerily quiet, though signs of Robert remained everywhere, his coffee mug in the sink, his jacket thrown carelessly over a chair. I set my suitcase down, knowing the confrontation would come soon. I didn't have long to wait. The door burst open that evening, revealing Robert, his face flushed with anger, clutching his phone with Martha's legal letter displayed on the screen. What the hell is this? He demanded, his voice echoing through the apartment. You're telling me I can't sell our home? It's half mine. I met his gaze, keeping my voice level. No, Robert. It's not. The deed has been solely in my name since we refinanced last year. You signed the transfer papers yourself. His face contorted in confusion. What are you talking about? I retrieved the deed from my files, calmly showing him his own signature. You never read what you sign, do you? Always too important, too busy. Well, this time it cost you. For a moment, his confidence faltered. Then his expression hardened into something ugly. You think you're so clever? This doesn't change anything. I've already made arrangements. The sale is void, I replied. The buyers know it. They're considering legal action against you for misrepresentation. If you spent a cent of their money, you're looking at fraud charges. His face paled slightly. You don't know what you're talking about, he muttered, but the uncertainty in his voice betrayed him. I know exactly what I'm talking about, Robert. You've spent years treating me like I'm too naive to understand these matters. But I was in law school when we met, remember? Before I put my career on hold for yours? He began pacing, his agitation growing. This is ridiculous. You can't just kick me out. Actually, I can. This apartment is legally mine. You can stay temporarily while you make other arrangements, but only because I'm giving you that courtesy. A courtesy you didn't extend to me when you called to say you'd sold my home out from under me. Over the next few days, Robert's anger gave way to desperate bargaining. Phone calls, pleading messages, even threats. His emotions ran the gamut as he realized the precariousness of his position. Meanwhile, Martha efficiently handled the legal details. The buyers withdrew from the fraudulent sale, and divorce proceedings began. You're in a strong position, Martha assured me during one of our meetings. Between the apartment situation and his clear intention to abandon the marriage, he has very little leverage. Ellen, my best friend since college, came over to help me reorganize the apartment. As we boxed up Robert's belongings, she asked, how's he handling all this? Not well, I admitted, folding one of his expensive shirts. He's still convinced he can talk his way out of it. Men like Robert never believe the rules apply to them, Ellen said, her voice tinged with the wisdom of her own difficult marriage. John was the same way before our divorce. I nodded, feeling a wave of gratitude for her presence. I spent so long thinking I needed to make this marriage work at any cost. Like failure wasn't an option. The real failure would be staying with someone who doesn't value you, Ellen replied, squeezing my hand. Trust me, the other side is brighter than you can imagine. The final confrontation. Jessica arrives. The confrontation I'd been preparing for came sooner than expected. I was reviewing publishing contracts at the dining table when the door opened and Robert walked in, but not alone. Jessica Parker stood beside him, her arm looped possessively through his, surveying the apartment with proprietary interest. So this is where we'll be staying, she announced, her voice dripping with entitlement. I set down my pen, studied them both. Jessica was beautiful in that polished, corporate way. Designer clothes, perfect makeup, not a hair out of place. At 38, she was 16 years younger than me, but the age gap wasn't what struck me. It was the confident certainty in her eyes, the same look I'd had at her age, believing Robert's promises. No, I said calmly, standing. This is where Robert was temporarily staying. Neither of you will be living here. Jessica's smile faltered. She glanced at Robert, confused. What is she talking about? Amelia's being difficult, Robert said dismissively. A technicality with the paperwork. I'll handle it. I laughed, the sound surprising even me. A technicality? Robert, you tried to sell property you don't legally own. That's fraud, not a technicality. Jessica's perfectly manicured hand tightened around her purse strap. Wait, what? You said this was your apartment. That the sale was final. He lied, I said simply, looking directly at her. The apartment has been solely in my name for over a year. He signed the transfer papers himself. The sale is void, and the buyers are considering legal action. A flash of uncertainty crossed her face. Is this true? She asked Robert. Jessica, it's complicated, he began, but his usual smooth confidence was fracturing. It's not complicated at all, I interjected, addressing Jessica directly. He tried to sell something that wasn't his, pocketed a deposit he had no right to, and planned to leave his wife of 28 years without a home. Those are the simple facts. Jessica took a step back, her expression shifting from confusion to anger. The money you promised for our condo was from this fraudulent sale? Robert's facade crumbled completely. I can explain everything, he pleaded. Jessica shook her head, her professional composure cracking. No, I'm not getting dragged into this mess. She turned to me, something like empathy flickering in her eyes. I didn't know about any of this. As she walked out, Robert turned his desperation on me. Amelia, please. We can work this out. 6 years together. 28 years, I corrected him. We've been married for 28 years, Robert. And you threw it away with a phone call, laughing about how I'd need to find somewhere else to live. His shoulders slumped. I made a mistake. I know that. No, a mistake is forgetting an anniversary. What you did was calculated cruelty. I handed him the divorce papers Martha had prepared. Sign these, move your things out by the end of the week, and we can both move on with our lives. He stared at the papers, defeat finally settling over him. You really want to end it like this? After everything we've built together? I didn't end it, Robert. You did. I'm just making sure I don't get buried in the rubble. As he left, shoulders hunched and steps heavy, I felt an unexpected pang of sadness. Not for the man walking away, but for the younger versions of ourselves and the dreams we'd once shared. But that sadness was quickly replaced by something stronger, a sense of reclamation. This apartment, my career, my future. They were mine to shape now. Epilogue. Rebirth. 1 month later, I hosted a dinner party in the renovated apartment. Ellen was there, along with Martha and colleagues from the publishing house. The space had been transformed, Robert's dark leather furniture replaced with pieces I'd always wanted. Walls were painted in warm colors, and my books, long relegated to a spare bedroom, now proudly displayed in the living room. To Amelia, Martha raised her glass, and her brilliant new historical fiction series. The toast celebrated more than just my professional success. The series I'd presented at that fateful Chicago conference had been enthusiastically greenlit, and I'd thrown myself into the project with newfound energy. Later, as the guests departed, Ellen lingered to help with dishes. You seem different, she observed. Lighter somehow. I considered this as I dried a wine glass. I spent so many years making myself smaller to accommodate Robert's ego. I didn't even realize I was doing it until I stopped. Do you ever miss him? She asked gently. I paused, allowing myself to honestly examine the question. I missed the idea of him, the partnership I thought we had. But that was an illusion I maintained through years of compromise and denial. After Ellen left, I stood by the window, watching the city lights. At 54, I was starting over in ways I'd never anticipated. There was apprehension in that thought, but exhilaration too. My phone chimed with a text from Sarah, our daughter. So proud of you, Mom. Can't wait to visit next weekend. My children had been surprisingly supportive once they understood the full situation. Robert's relationship with them had always been complicated, demanding achievement while being emotionally distant. They'd witnessed more of our troubled marriage than I'd realized. I thought of Robert's final attempt at reconciliation last week. Flowers sent to my office with a card pleading for another chance. I donated the flowers to the hospital across the street and hadn't responded to the card. Some chapters couldn't be rewritten. As I prepared for bed, I caught my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me wasn't young, wasn't perfect, bore the lines of life's disappointments and joys alike. But there was strength in her eyes that hadn't been there before, a quiet certainty. You'll be all right, I told my reflection, and for the first time in years, I completely believed it. I thought of that phone call in Chicago, how Robert had laughed when telling me I'd need to find a new place to live. His arrogance had been his undoing, and my quiet resilience had been my salvation. This wasn't just the end of a marriage, it was the beginning of the life I deferred for too long. And finally, completely, I felt free.